Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. With Mercedes the big winners of this weekend's French Grand Prix, outside of course the winner himself, Max Verstappen, their first double podium of the season so far, with further updates coming to the Hungarian Grand Prix next weekend. Is the wait for a victory not too far away? Hamilton is getting ever closer, and with the path they're currently on, understanding the way they need to take the development, they're certainly confident they can achieve it in the second half of the season. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. The first podium between these two gentlemen, at least I guess since Belgium last year, whereas wasn't really a proper race to be honest. But at least the first podium with Russell and Hamilton both on it for Mercedes. Hamilton P2, Russell P3 after a remarkable battle with Checo Perez at the end of the race. But yeah, kind of out of nowhere really, after no pace at all in qualifying, surprising Mercedes themselves, yesterday on Saturday, they deliver a very impressive race performance here on Sunday. Of course, yes, once again helped by Ferrari in general, strategic mishaps, you could argue, driver mishaps as well in Charles Leclerc's case, and of course slight to the back of the grid because he had the engine issues before, and Max Verstappen just being very consistent, delivering the goods. But it does seem like Mercedes are edging ever closer to a victory. Hamilton now, as had podiums in his last 4 races in a row, 3 third places. Now he's got up to a second place, could even go one better at the Hungaroring next weekend, a track that he's very good at. Might not suit their car so well as it does, let's say, the Ferrari, but with further upgrades, Mercedes seem to know exactly what they're doing with their upgrades right now and are getting the results that they're expecting from them, even though it hasn't necessarily appeared quite so far in qualifying. First race Hamilton in his career, Melbourne 2007, was on the podium there, 300th race on the podium once again this weekend. And just this is really an indictment on Ferrari. We just wanted to mention this, that Ferrari this season have 11 podium finishes. Mercedes actually only have 9, which is really not too much difference. They now got their first second place today. But in terms of points, there's only 44 points between the two teams, despite the fact that Ferrari have a much quicker car than Mercedes, half a second faster, depending on what's going on generally on the average of the season. In previous years, when Mercedes have had the car that's half a second faster than the Ferrari, like their lead in the championship is just immense, right? It just goes to show that Ferrari just never seems to capitalize on their advantages. Of course, this time Red Bull Racing are certainly in play as well. And look, Mercedes are still a little bit off the pace, but they're only 44 points, I believe it is right now, off the second place of the Ferraris in the Constructors' Championship. And that race is certainly not over, and even, second place maybe in the drivers is up for grabs. Verstappen does look like he's probably going to run away with it this year. But comments from the drivers, of course, after the race, Hamilton was feeling fantastic, an incredible result from Mercedes, very impressed that they were able to deliver that P2, and the car did seem way better today. The fact that they were able to beat Perez on pure pace was pretty impressive, I thought. Perez had a pretty shocking weekend, all things considered, but still a great result for the Mercedes, saying that even I think in yesterday's interview after qualifying, he said that they brought some upgrades here, but very minimal ones, and they believe that going forwards with further upgrades, that really is where they're going to take their big steps, potentially next weekend of the Hungaroring, but also maybe after that for Belgium as well. And George Russell also went on to say that they now understand the path they're going on is the correct one. They trust that this car with the no side pod design is the way to go. It can be the faster version of the two kind of concepts they came up with before the season began. They're going to stick with it. They know the development path they're on is taking them in the right direction. The upgrades pretty much from Silverstone, Austria seem to be working as intended. Maybe not in qualifying this weekend, but in terms of race pace, they were pretty much where they would have hoped to have been, I think, all things considered. Coming into the weekend with further upgrades to come, and of course the technical directive coming into play from the Belgian Grand Prix in a few weeks' time, which will restrict the ability to use the flexi floors that apparently Red Bull and Ferrari are using to gain maybe 2 or 3 tenths of a second a lap. That's what Toto Wolff reckon, at least. Like maybe we are looking at a very similar pecking order by the time we get to the second half of the season.
When we say we had updates, we bought like the tiniest thing, so it could be half a tenth, maybe a tenth if it worked perfect.
We expect we can match Checo and Carlos, but still, Max and Charles are a step ahead of their teammates in that regard, and Lewis and I are probably about three tenths behind them. Max for sure is just cruising until the end. So if we want to fight for victories, we still need to find more performance. But I think as a team, we feel like we're on the right path now. It's probably since Silverstone, maybe since Austria, I think we have a clear direction where we need to go with our development, which is a really great thing in itself. It doesn't mean we can actually achieve more performance, but at least we know, or at least we believe, if we go in this direction, we will find more performance. So I think post summer break is going to be exciting.
But for some reason, our race pace is a little bit better. I can't answer to why, but I'm grateful for that because that's the majority of the time that's the most important pace. But of course, we got to do. We don't know why we came into this weekend and we had a bigger gap on a single lap.
And just looking at the race pace right here, I think this will give Mercedes an awful lot of confidence. If Verstappen was the fastest man on track, Sainz only 0.3 of a second behind, albeit stuck in traffic for a large portion of the race. This probably helps to a degree by his medium stint at the end where he was so much faster than anyone else because he put in the new mediums and was lapping seconds quicker than anyone else on track. But still, Sainz was a monster this weekend, all weekend long, and delivered a strong result, even though the team tried their best to prevent that from happening. Perez was about 0.5 a second a lap off Verstappen, which is, I don't really think this is indicative of Verstappen driving phenomenally. I think Verstappen just drove a solid race, but Perez was kind of off the boil this weekend, there's no doubt about it. Hamilton was quicker than Perez, Russell was very close to Perez, Hamilton about 0.4 of a second a lap behind Verstappen, which honestly, given the fact it's a longer lap, back in Austria they were 0.6 of a second a lap off the pace, and here they're 0.4 off on a much longer lap. So on an Austria circuit, that's more like 2.5, 3 off, which is pretty much where they think they are. But I think what will please Mercedes maybe the most here is because every team outside of Red Bull and Ferrari were just terrible on qualifying, right? It seemed like it was Mercedes, McLaren, Alpine, and like they were so far off the pace. Like the Red Bulls and the Ferraris were up there doing like a 1:31.0, and everyone else was struggling to get into the 1:31s. Most teams were in the 1:32s, even 1:33s. So if you look at this graph, right, you can just see that. I was kind of surprised. I was looking at the telemetry, or looking at the numbers on the left-hand side, and Alonso was like 25 seconds back on Russell. I was like, how has that happened? The previous couple of races, that would not be the case. But the Alpine was just way slower, and all the other cars than all of the front runners. So for some reason this weekend, it just seemed like the Red Bull and the Ferrari, especially in qualifying, they continued that in the race, of course, to a certain degree, but they were just so much quicker than everyone else. So whether Mercedes will think, okay, maybe it's a flexi floor thing, that maybe that treats them better on this track than others, but the entire field was way further behind the front runners this time than usual, and that was also the case with Mercedes in qualifying. So for them to able to be right up there with the front runners in the race was no one else could ever hope to match any performance like that. I mean, the McLarens were a second off even Mercedes pace in terms of race numbers. I think that will give them confidence that as things progress, they can also be the ones competing for race victories on pure pace and pure merit, which might well still be the case, because of course next weekend we go to the Hungaroring, the Hungarian Grand Prix, where Hamilton is the most successful driver ever at this track, the king of the ring, as he is sometimes known, winning it on 8 different occasions. So I'm not really sure this Mercedes suits that track particularly well. Very high downforce track you have to run. Should be better for, maybe it's not great for Red Bull, right? It could well be better for Ferrari. It should be a Ferrari track. They obviously absolutely have to win there. But if all of a sudden Leclerc was to win next weekend, and then Hamilton and Russell and Sainz were to be ahead of the Red Bulls, if that was even possible, then maybe the championship is still alive if Verstappen can't really compete. If the Red Bulls don't easily have the pace to get on the podium, but it's kind of doubtful that's going to happen. So next weekend could be a good one. Not a circuit that maybe suits the Mercedes too well. I'm sure we'll talk about it in the coming days, but I think they're kind of targeting the second half of the season, with Russell confident that their upgrades are taking them in the right direction to really be competing for race victories on pure merit. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.